Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I'm so happy to have Kaila Yu with us. And she is the author of Fetishized, A Reckoning with Yellow Fever, Feminism, and Beauty. And it's really getting such accolades, so well deserved. You had a review in the New York Times, and you have so many followers on Instagram and also following on TikTok. And it's just great to be speaking with you because we have so much to cover in this book that talks about feminism and identity and the male gaze and how that gets transmuted. And you just do so much. And I want to just tell people a little bit about you. Kaila Yu is a freelance writer for the Los Angeles Times, Rolling Stone, the New York Times, Business Insider, Condé Nast Traveler, and more. Formerly, she was a model and the lead singer for the all-Asian American female rock band Nylon Pink. Welcome, Kaila.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about this. I mean, this is a reckoning with the way that people, I'll say men, people have fetishized the Asian look, the Asian concept, and you do this through using a lot of cultural touchstones throughout your book. And we'll talk about the structure as well. You're somebody who's benefited from that, and you unabashedly talk about that in the book. Can you talk a little bit more about how you feel the book covers what you wanted it to cover?
Yeah, definitely. Really came of age during the 2000s, and I put this other book in my book called Feminist Chauvinist Pigs by Ariel Levy. And she talks about how the 2000s particularly was like what she deemed the raunch era. It was like very pornified. Pornography first, we got our high-speed internet and we're able to stream pornography for the first time, and it was now available at your fingertips, when prior to that you had to go to a store and sneak a magazine or something. And so as a result, like the culture became very pornified, and women were really rewarded for sexualizing themselves. And we thought it was empowering. So I was going along with that wave too. And then I saw that Asian women in particularly were really boxed into the sexualized aesthetic. So I was like, well, this seems like the only way.
So this was your way out, kind of, to get into the wider world and make your mark. And your legal name is different than Kaila Yu, and you talk about how your original self was nerdy, bookwormish, and that's Elaine Yang. And,
Yeah.
and so it's almost like a butterfly, which you reference in the book, the concept of butterfly and how it ties into the Asian identity. You transformed yourself. So tell me more about that. I mean, you learned, how to do hair and makeup and make yourself into the badass, the Asian, the girl. What is it? There's
ABG, they're Asian baby girls.
the
Yeah, it's a stereotype in the Asian American community. But yeah, with Asian Americans, there's like this whole general idea of them being the model minority trope. It's like a myth, but that Asians are like nerdy and studious and obedient and they like are upwardly mobile. And I very much didn't want to fit that stereotype because growing up, like boys didn't pay attention to me. And I was like, oh, well, nobody wants the real me. So I feel like I have to manufacture this glamorized version of myself to get any attention because I got zero. And the Asian baby girl aesthetic kind of grew out of that. Like the Asian Americans as a whole were trying to fight back against that nerdy stereotype.
So you were doing the pinups, and that was before you even did your music, before you were in Nylon Pink. So you kind of had that aesthetic, and you had some things that happened to you, which you talk about in the book, which informed much of how you then dealt with some traumatic things that happened. And what I really liked about the book is the way you structured it, because it's sort of like a memoir and essays. And it also deals with cultural mores with Asian women. And you broke it down into sections that are referenceable, like kind of connected to Asian culture. So daddy, geisha, butterfly, ABGs, China dolls, bad Asian, bunnies, exotic, race queens, not Lucy Liu. Then your song, Candy Coated Sugar Sex, and Slanted, which we'll get to, Lolita's Unicorn, A Reckoning, and Deep. And some of it is definitely connected to Asian cultural values, even if it was values at the time. And others are connected to your own experience, because after all, this is a memoir. It's not just a cultural expose of feminism and the male gaze as it goes to Asians. How did you decide on the structure of doing it, which I think is very clever and really works for the book?
Yeah, I always wanted to do a memoir and essays just because I had read a lot of memoirs and essays that I loved. I loved Kathy Park's Minor Feelings. I loved Emily Ratajkowski's My Body. So those were like kind of books in the same genre. And then as I started doing research for the stories, because originally it was just about I was going to reference growing up and like what media influenced me, like Memoirs of a Geisha and Harajuku Girls and stuff like that. But as I started digging into the research of the history of the Asian fetish, I was really shocked at some of the colonialism and the violence that actually birthed it. So I thought that was very important to include because we're obviously not taught that in history books.
Yes, yes. You're referring to the idea of the sexual slavery behind Asian women as compliant and submissive. And I've even heard jokes women have said, "Oh, when I die, my husband's going to marry an Asian woman."
That's a
You know, like,
horrible
and
joke.
give in
Yeah.
to his every whim. So
Yeah.
that is absolutely out there in the culture. And
Hmm.
so you're addressing that. And in terms of cultural references, you talk about the Joy Luck Club, and you talk about Memoirs of Geisha, and you talk about the Fast and the Furious, which had all these Asian dramatic women with the long eyelashes and the long nails and, sleek. And that was a whole thing in the 2000s, right?
Yeah, it was just very much like the only real example of Asian women growing up were highly sexualized. And then they were very celebrated when they're sexualized. I think only when Lucy Liu came along, she like fell into some of these stereotypes, I believe, at first. And then she's since broken out and she can play a role that's written for anybody. But when she first started, it was like Kill Bill, the kind of dragon lady type assassin and Ally McBeal, she came out and she was like this man-eating lawyer. But what's been exciting is to see her like blossom beyond that. But during that time period, there was very limited representation.
Yeah. She even talks about that now. She shows her freckles, before it
Yeah.
was part of the thing to cover it, because that was the whole dragon lady mystique. You talk about so much in your book of the culture, of how you went into it, the traumatic things that happened to you, how you dealt with it. And you did a foray into drugs and alcohol, and you talk about that in the book because I guess the culture and the constant pressure of being fetishized brought that out. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I mean, I just always felt so uncomfortable in my skin, like painfully so. And I didn't realize it. I wasn't aware. I was just like very, very uncomfortable and actually very shy. But when I first started doing drugs, it felt like love, actually. And so it was very, very addicting to me in a way, I think, more than the average person because I was so empty of this desperate need for validation. I don't know, drugs and alcohol really helped me for a while because it like helped heal that for a while until it got
Didn't.
out of control. Yeah.
Right. And you have people in the band who it didn't go as well for, and you
Yeah.
talk about that in the book. I mean, you don't shy away from themes in your own life of the things that held you back, moved you forward. And it has a lot of depth to it, this book. It's not just talking about the cultural tropes. It's really using your own identity and transmutation, let's say, of your identity. And you also start, which is really interesting, when you open the book, you give the Urban Dictionary definition of Asiaphile as a noun. And I'll just read it. It says the term applies to a non-Asian person, particularly a white man who has yellow fever, thinks all Asian chicks are hot, usually can't tell the difference between a homely and a cute one just as long as she is Asian. And it says Lucy Liu is Asiaphile's favorite, and that's from the Urban Dictionary. So
Yeah.
we're not talking the official dictionary.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if that was in the official dictionary?
That would be wild.
Yeah.
But then you did give Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 11th edition, definition of fetish as a noun, an object of irrational reverence or obsessive devotion. So there's that other side, right? So there's the using it and using it for pleasure and, sexual gratification. And there's also the devotion aspect. And I think you also, as part of the band and in your career as a model, got some of that devotion. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think the devotion is to the Asian idea of Asian woman. So it's not to the individual Asian woman. That's the importance. Like true love is based on the individual person. And the reason the fetish is problematic is because it's devotion to this idea and then the expectation of the Asian woman to behave submissively or give up everything for the man. And I always want to stress that not every man who gets with an Asian woman has an Asian fetish. I would say the majority are probably legitimate relationships, but there is a very vocal minority, which makes everybody look bad, honestly. Yeah.
And you talk about becoming sober and how you kind of question some of the choices you made, but you realize you made your choices because of the culture that you were in and how you were perceiving your value as an Asian woman. And throughout the book, there is a transformation, which we get to at the end. And so you perceive your value differently at the end, which I also like, because at the end of Memoir, there should be some sort of change that took
Yeah,
place.
hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. And is it an ongoing change?
Oh my God, that is a lifetime work. I mean, I think my journey of trying to find self-love, some days you have more love for yourself, some days you have less. I've been recommending this book to everybody. It's called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And it's basically like a manual on teaching yourself self-love. And I've been practicing that because, self-love's infinite, right? You'll never have too much of it.
Right. And, they always say, put your own oxygen mask on before you
Yeah.
give somebody else. So you talk about not having a great relationship or much of a relationship with your father. How do you think that either helped make you make your choices or didn't really go into the equation at all?
Yeah, and I always want to preface this with my dad was an amazing, kind person, but culturally he was not taught to be affectionate or say I love you. That's like just not really Asian father culture. But I'm in America watching the Brady Bunch and seeing all this demonstrative love, and I'm not getting it. So it's very confusing. And then I like to use this recent example. Like I just read Gwyneth Paltrow's book. This journalist wrote this really good book about her, and it just shared how her father and her were like so close, and he thought she was the greatest thing in the world. He told her so. He was like, no matter what happens with any man, I will always be there for you. And she
And
just
that,
feels very secure. So she goes out into the world and just like glides towards an Oscar. It's all very like seemingly easy, honestly. And I think it's because I deserve, of course, of course. And I didn't have any of that. So,
yeah, so
yeah.
her dad's Bruce Paltrow. He was Bruce Paltrow. And I think Amy Odell wrote the book about her, journalist Amy Odell. And she didn't approve it, by the way. So
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
unapproved.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she would take to task some of it, but it is interesting and it's not disputed anywhere that her dad really gave her a lot of love and adoration and support. And I think that
Mhm.
is very important. I
Yeah,
agree.
it just makes you like a secure person. And they have the term daddy issues for a reason, right? It is truly something that affects you.
I agree. And so it's interesting that you also talk about you internalize the misogyny of The Little Mermaid. Now, up until a few years ago, I didn't think The
Yeah,
Little
yeah. I don't think.
Mermaid was misogynist at all. And now I can't get away from thinking it that the value is that this woman doesn't have a voice and
Yeah.
she's still loved. And the idea is that you don't want to diminish yourself to be loved by a man. And so I think that's not only in the Asian kind of trope,
Yeah.
it's everywhere. Like no one should be
It's
diminishing
basically
themselves.
all fairy tales, right? When we were growing up, we're all about winning the man at the end, the prince. Yeah.
It was like the early form of, controlled media were the
Yeah.
fairy tales. That's how you control the kids, right? They're being raised and told these things that's going to help as they grow up. So I think that's really important that you talk about it and you reference you want it to be like Ariel, but then you realize later what that's about. And the idea that you kind of grew up in the suburban community in Upland, right? It was just kind of an ordinary upbringing. And then you wanted to break out into the world. And so you had to break free of almost all your conditioning to be able to do that. So that means there's this huge drive within you. And where did that drive come from?
I think that came from my mom, even though like it didn't result in the way she wanted. Because I was extremely rebellious and tough to have as a daughter, frankly. I describe her as she's typical tiger mom, like very domineering and very A's are the only thing you can get. A minus is a fail. And this kind of ideology where you just have to perform at your best and compete against your cousins or her friends' daughters or whatever. So I got that achievement, I think, value from my mother, which I appreciate because it causes me to go after things, but it can also cause me to be critical and hard on myself.
That makes sense. And the competition aspect,
Yes, yeah,
you know,
that's
you
exhausting.
you talk about that in the book as well, about how you felt jealousy in the section, the Lolita section. There was a young girl in the band. She got a huge amount of attention. And then you had drama with another bandmate that you started out so close. And that was all about the expression of jealousy from your part. And so, how have you reckoned with that? Is that still part of your makeup because you're still driven, competitive? How has that changed or not?
Yeah, that's a work in progress for sure. Because I am like competitive by nature, but I guess maybe even just getting older, that kind of like calms down and you just start to care less. but I don't think I compete against women as much. I'll compete against, oh, like this other author got this, feature in Washington Post. I want that too. So it's like more that kind of competition rather than like what woman's getting more attention from a man. That's not really on my radar anymore.
Yeah, and also as you evolve, things that maybe would have bothered you more before are probably being left by the wayside, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. When you get older, you just care a lot less, which is like the priceless. I would never want to go back to my 20s and the insecurity and the feelings of that time.
I agree. And what about the way that young girls are being raised today? Do you think it's better? Do you think it's healthier? I have a 16-year-old daughter, so I try to empower her as much as possible.
Is so much better. I think, there's still plenty to go, and we're going through like a back movement at the moment. Or I think we made a lot of progress with Me Too, and we're getting a lot of reaction from people who are anti-Me Too, frankly. But Me Too has changed the world, really, right? Because it was a movement that went into all kinds of different countries, and we are believing women, still not completely, but a hell of a lot more than before that. So I think also Gen Z is so much more smarter and more aware than we were. So I
Yeah,
have hope for them.
I think people are growing up faster in some ways
Yeah.
today, maybe because of the internet and social media and their phones all the time that they've had since seventh or eighth or ninth grade, probably seventh grade. And when I was a couple of years younger than my daughter is now, I mean, I was still wearing Geranimals and, like hanging out at friends and, they just get so much more at them. Like, I
Well, I
think
guess we could be brainwashed easier because there was like only these TV channels. There was no internet until I was in high school. So yeah, there was just limited media that was popular.
how do you reckon with yourself that you benefited from the fetishization of Asian women? I mean, that's kind of why you're sitting where you are today, right? Because you built up your career to a point, you built up your following to a point where people did want to hear more from you about it.
Yeah, I think at the time the difference was that I didn't realize that the fetishization led to violence. So I was like, oh, these men fetishize Asian women is creepy and gross, but like whatever. It wasn't like that big of a deal. Even though I got assaulted by an Asian fetishist and it didn't like really connect in my mind. But now it's become very clear that it was born of violence and it can lead to violence in many scenarios. So that's why I know what I know, and I didn't know that at the time. And I try to be just really gentle on my little girl because I'm so hard on her, and she was just really lost.
Yeah. And so you are trying to reparent yourself in
Yes,
a
yeah,
way.
definitely a lot of reparenting going on.
Yeah. And you use nature to do that, and you talk about that in the book. And that's really interesting to me because what is less artifice than nature?
Yeah.
The ocean, you talk about free diving and how that really helps you. And I thought that was very interesting to read because, again, it's like stripping away all the artifice of that geisha
Yeah.
concept. You can't be geisha when you're
Underwater. Yeah.
exactly. You can't be wearing wigs or eyelashes or any of that because they talk about nature as a spiritual refuge, as a spiritual way to connect with yourself. And yet, I think your book does it really clearly in a way that everyone can really grasp because of where you came from and then what that provided for you. Yeah.
In my 20s, I always called myself a city girl and I actually really didn't like nature. So it was really an unwrapping of that self that was so tied to the material world.
And you talk about you've had surgeries. I mean, you had eyelid surgery to look, I guess, less Asian, even though it was kind of the fetishization. So it was like Asian, but in the way that the men thought would be good. So it's kind of combining the features. And then you had a labiaplasty
I'm
to
still
kind
not sure how to pronounce it, but
of
yes, I think that,
labiaplasty.
yeah.
You changed your fracture your vagina, basically. So that is something that you talk about very honestly, and the insecurities or the reasoning. Today, would you do both those surgeries?
Well, the eyelid surgery, I think, has mostly fallen. So I have double eyelids, so it's cut to make it higher. And I think it's fallen, so I don't think I'm going to redo it. And I wouldn't get labiaplasty again because I didn't really need it, I don't think. I never look at it, so who cares? I do want to admit that I'm very happy with my implants and I would get those. And then maybe that is playing into some misogyny. That's the honest truth. I'm just really happy with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not only an Asian thing.
But it's crazy if you just really think about it, like
Yeah.
women just putting these bags into themselves. It's really more for men, even though you say you fit better in clothes. I do think that is more for the male gaze. Yeah.
What do you want to most happen as a result of your book being out there in the world?
I think just having people to get a chance to like critically think about things. Maybe let's do this sooner than later. Right now, we're having like a whole critical reckoning with the 2000s, right? Monica Lewinsky's in the eye again, but we're treating her as the victim she was. Pamela Anderson's having a renaissance. But why don't we not wait 20 years to do this and celebrate the women while they're currently doing their thing instead of tearing them down? The whole thing with Katy Perry, I don't know if you noticed where there was like everybody was attacking her for basically doing nothing. It wasn't like she was Harvey Weinstein. She was doing some things that people thought were cringy or whatever, and the internet just attacked her.
You mean the astronaut thing that she
Yeah,
says?
yeah,
And
yeah. People went crazy over that. And it was like, really? I mean, this is an outsized reaction to what she's doing.
I remember when she sang "I Kissed a Girl," and everyone was like, "Oh!" And it was like
Yeah.
so exciting and new. And now there's a million songs like that.
We
Groundbreaking.
celebrate them and then we tear them down.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so important. I think celebrities realize this now, to separate the celebrity from your real life, right? And
Yeah.
that's part of what nature and spirituality does, all those practices, because there's an illusion. And it's fine. I love illusion. I love
Hmm.
eyelashes. I love makeup. I love hair, but the realness of who you are, that can't just be it. And I think with all these cultural stereotypes, you just see the package and
Hmm.
nothing more. And that's what the media, whether it's a film or a movie or something, wants to show you. And you also talk about you had been with that whole car culture. You went to the car shows and you did like that whole thing presenting as the glamorous Asian. And that was a whole career. I was surprised. I said, oh, wow, there's a whole business built around that. I never realized
Yeah,
that.
a lot of people are surprised to hear about that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a very niche. I don't think it really exists anymore at that level. But yeah, I
Yeah.
had a moment for about like 10 or 15 years.
Now, do you feel that you would still want to benefit in some way from fetishism in the next thing that you do, or is it like something you put to rest or want to put to rest?
No, I mean, I discovered writing by accident, and it's been the most priceless gift of my life because, as you know, it doesn't matter what you look like. I could write until I'm 99 or whatever. And I think next I'll be tinkering around with the idea of food analysis. It's in the same vein, but more about food instead of sex. So I would be going off in a different direction.
Like crying in H Mart or something like that kind
Kind of like analyzing media like Eat, Drink, Man, Love and like Joy Luck Club and like how Asian culture is represented in food in
of?
ways that it tells stories. Yeah, I haven't fully fleshed out the idea yet. I'm
Yeah.
tinkering around with it.
And what's next for you? I mean, obviously the book just came out. What's next for you though, besides promoting the book?
Oh, well, first of all, the second book, I'm working on like tinkering around and researching and doing the proposal for that. But then also, we're campaigning to just get it into universities for gender studies and Asian American studies. Because for me, as an Asian woman, it would have been really helpful for me to have this book growing up. Yeah, that's kind of the focus at the moment.
I like that. And do you think this could become a movie?
I would love that. Yeah.
Would you want to
Uh,
play yourself or would
no, 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 no.
you
I
somebody
don't want
else?
to do any entertainment career stuff anymore. I feel like that's so stressful. Like, I think the greatest gift of my life is realizing that the entertainment career was so miserable. Like, all the competition for the limited parts and always like feeling bad about yourself, or not good enough. I mean, there's some of that related to writing too, but at least it's not on your appearance.
Right, right. How has the reaction to the book either surprised you, challenged you, or made you think about something a little differently, if possible?
The book is written for women, obviously. And the surprising thing is that men have been reading it and like having their own mind blown reactions because they have no idea any of this is going on, frankly. They don't understand what it's like to be a woman or anything. And then some really surprising reactions is like a couple dads have mentioned to me, like, oh, I read your daddy chapter. And one man was like, oh, I went and gave my daughter a hug. I mean, this generation's much better at parenting than my generation. It's improved since then, but hopefully it will have a positive influence on some other little girl's life. That's all I could hope for. Yeah.
I love that because you just never know where somebody's going to get their influences. So instead of fairy tales, let it
Yeah.
be, the books that share the truths and lived experience of people like yourself. We covered so much, and this has been such a pleasure covering all these issues of identity and feminism and looking at yourself in a new way and valuing yourself. Everyone, Fetishized, A Reckoning with Yellow Fever, Feminism and Beauty by Kaila Yu. You have to pick it up. You have to look at all the tropes and really think about what the impact of it has been on your life, your identity, whether or not you're Asian, and almost as important, the men in your life and how they think about Asian women. Thank you so much, Kaila.
Thank you.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.